Welcome to another episode of Quaggling Sand. Try not to think about it. I chose that title for a couple of reasons. If you are looking at the episode artwork, which is a photo I took in the back of an actual airplane when I was returning from a holiday departure from my home city of Las Vegas to, at long last, visit my fully vaccinated parents in Phoenix. I was fully vaccinated back in February, and returning from Phoenix, got to see right up close and personal the safety card from a 737 MAX aircraft. And as it happens, when I landed, and I think the next day or two, there were headlines to the effect that the 737 MAX is once again having, I think it was electrical problems. So shaking my head a little bit, trying not to think about it. But if you're a Far Side fan, if you're a Gary Larson, The Far Side, I wouldn't even call it a comic. I would call it brilliance of our time. There was a really, really good one. There are many, but there was a good one with a young chicken sick in bed and mom coming in with a bowl of soup, and she just says, just try not to think about it. So that's my sense of humor. Anyway, so not only that, but I've had two episodes, the first and second, in fact, of the Quaggling Sand podcast were basically about wanting to start a sprint for my solo entrepreneurial efforts to align some kind of progress with some sort of schedule or some sort of some timeline or some it's always nice to have a goal, short-term goals. And that was the first episode. Then the second episode was, well, that didn't work out so well. And when I was packing to go to Phoenix, I used to travel all the time. When I worked for Intel, I traveled every week. I was on 100 airplanes per year, just over. Lots of frequent flyer miles, lots of chilling in airports. I used to joke that I could call, via the app, the relevant app, I could call for a Lyft. Here in Vegas, Lyft is better than Uber, in my opinion. I could call for a Lyft and then start packing, and I would be able to be ready to go in 20 minutes. When you're traveling every week, that's pretty trivial. Then it turns out that there were so many Lyft drivers living near me that I couldn't pack in 4 minutes or whatever. So they were always available at any time of day or night, which was nice. It's a nice feature, I suppose. Even though Lyft and Uber are soul-crushing, marketplace-busting. Well, that's another episode, some other time. Anyway, so I was packing, and I was looking around for my laptop accoutrement. Somewhere I have I think it's a Traeger shell, just for the laptop, and I would put that into a messenger bag or whatever. So when I was traveling, it was whatever laptop I was carrying around was reasonably protected. And I couldn't find, which is ridiculous, I couldn't find the pieces, right? The power brick, the Traeger, how was I going to carry it, which bag, whatever. It's been well over a year since I traveled anywhere, so the bits and pieces have been repurposed here and there as needed. So, and then of course, after so long, you think, oh, I know this part's over there, and that part's I'm using the brick for this other thing over here. I have actually the laptop I'm recording this on right now, in fact. So I have it plugged in to charge. but I know I have another travel brick, and I don't know where that went. It's somewhere. So I was thinking while I was scrambling around, because of course, not quite the 20-minute model, but I was throwing a couple of days worth of stuff into a bag. I was bringing some things to home, so it was a nice little Briggs and Riley carry-on. So do I want to have my laptop in there if I had the trigger, or wherever I put it? Do I want to bring a separate bag? Do I want to carry more stuff? And then it occurred to me that I'm traveling to visit my parents and to celebrate. Not really, not the holiday of Easter is on the calendar is convenient because it was a nice gathering date. But as it happens, my parents' wedding anniversary is the day after, or was the day after Easter this year. So that worked out nicely. So why am I so worried about bringing a laptop with me to go visit my parents and my sister and her husband? We shot over to her house for dinner. We celebrated my parents' anniversary the next day. Do I really need my laptop for any of this? Or can I put the laptop down and sprints and code and projects, and why not just try not to think about it? And so a topic for a podcast episode. So there you go. So I took a couple days off, and it was nice because when you do that, you find yourself saying, oh, I got to do this. I was writing some things down. I have Joplin on my phone. Of course, I had my phone, so I was reasonably connected. I did use, I think I've mentioned this. My mom and I do a podcast together. My mom's been a podcaster for years. And funny story, we went to the Guitar Center, which I think is now bankrupt. Unfortunately, nice. That was a nice chain of stores. We went there. She had an old, I can't remember what it was called, the H2 or H2 Zoom, the old gray. If you're into audio recording, the old gray crappy plastic Zoom recorder with the two XLR combo jacks in the bottom, two mics crossed at the top, very creaky, not the best construction. The early days of Zoom audio products, I suppose. So she was trading that in for an H4 Pro. And we were at the counter, and because of the times we live in, of course, the salesperson assumed I was just standing there. My mom was at the counter with her old Zoom player, hovering over the Zoom H4 Pro in the glass case, ready to ask, do you have some of these? And I'd like to trade this in, and so forth. And so, of course, the person behind the counter assumed, older woman over there, younger guy over here, probably the guy is the nerd. Not false, but people always find it interesting or entertaining or funny or curious that my mom has been a podcaster for so long, and she used to put 3,000 to 5,000 minutes on a cell phone every month. Back when it was the Motorola Bone phone or the phone bolted into the car, she's been a functional technology nerd for a good long time. So we recorded a podcast on the H4 Pro when I was there in Phoenix, and then I prepared and posted that episode all from my phone. We're using Anchor at the moment for distribution, and I'm using Anchor for this podcast and my other podcast, FFS Talk, and others. And I think Anchor is sort of useful. Their mobile tools are not perfect by any means, not great, but I was able to accomplish that with just the phone. So not having the laptop, it did remind me that there's a time and a place to actually indulge in life and interacting with humans, which is something I've not been doing much of since I continue to live the Martian lifestyle. I jokingly say that I'm just home growing potatoes. So I work from home all the time, and being that I live in Las Vegas, I would like to stay away from the sick. Even though I am fully vaccinated, I figured, well, I've been doing it for a year. There's no reason to break the stride. So I mostly stay home. And I have no shortage of things to do to catch up on. There are probably sprints on sprints at this point to catch up on. So it was a nice reminder that every once in a while you got to put the stuff down, put pencils down, and relax a bit, step away, re-energize a little bit. And I found that it was useful. It set me behind, if you will, but then I found that I was really falling behind either way. So net positive leaving the laptop home, but I am still somewhat overwhelmed with the number of things that I want to accomplish, and then the number of things that I really need to accomplish. Luckily is a smaller set, or maybe it's an overlapping set. There's some intersection there. But I would really like to deploy the website for this show, FFS, Hugo Floss, which is the podcast with my mom. My personal sort of blog site, my company website, even though I don't really have much to put on there at the moment, since all the projects I'm executing on right now are my own. So there's a long list of things, but we did, when I was in Phoenix, discuss with another person there in Arizona the CasaNunzia project. I've advanced that cause a little bit. We're working on the nonprofit filing paperwork, which, if you've never done that in the state of Nevada, it's probably about 10 minutes of hard work to do the filing itself, but getting the mission statement / purpose written down in such a way as it's easier to, it's a starting point for discussions, I should say. So I've found with this project, which I've been talking about for, it'll probably be 4 years come January. Because technically, no, it's been longer than that. I'll get into this more, and we will no doubt launch a podcast dedicated to the CasaNunzia, whether it's a foundation or whatever it shall be. I anticipate there being a charity arm and possibly maybe a 501c6 or a 501c4, depending on how we interact with the on the ground, so to speak. But the charity organization focused on education and coordination and collaboration. Develop. I don't know if I think I mentioned this, but CasaNunzia project, which will then be named appropriately once we actually form it, is about sort of implementing a a co-creation environment between technology development entities, whether it's companies, like big companies, small companies, maybe individuals. Not only technologies, but things, the Internet of, perhaps. So connecting the people on the implementation side, design and implementation really, or as I put it, the ideation, innovation, and implementation side, putting those people together with the actual users of these things, the co-creation model, not new. But if you take a person, a population of users who really need assistive technologies, and you pair them up with the people and companies that are making these things, designing and building products, services, if you involve people early on in an iterative process that has some structure to it, you ideally will end up with better products for not only the people that need them, but by extension, the people that want them. The example I use is if you took someone with a speech issue, whether from injury or otherwise, smart speakers are not necessarily so appealing, but the ability to use audio commands is useful, especially for someone with limited mobility in general. So the mass appeal of a smart speaker is the ability to say a magic word to get the attention. I think it's an attention word, right? And because I am surrounded by Amazon products, I will not utter any of the words, and you may be surrounded by them as well. So I will not, for your sake as also. Well, if I need to turn on the water for the bath, or I need to turn off the water or check the temperature, but if I'm unable to say those words, a smart speaker certainly would be useful if it's integrated into a system of assisted living technologies in a home. If I can't speak so that it's understood, then the utility goes away. And even worse, if there is a presumption that it will work, but I am unable to speak, there's a possibility of maybe a safety issue, a personal comfort, safety, right? So that's one trivial example, really, in the scheme of things. So making it possible for an iterative co-creation process across different types of products and services aimed at making these things better for people who need them, which will ultimately benefit as well people who want them. And there you go. That seems like to me, like a straightforward, simple idea. Simple in quotes, probably. So we'll form a charitable organization focused and dedicated to forming these collaborative relationships and an overarching infrastructure to put everything together, to drive some efforts. Pardon me. And we'll go from there. So it's something that occurred to me while I was working with Intel. I was in the Maker Innovator group, so I was encountering a lot of makers, and we were developing at the time. I was on the Galileo, Edison, Curio. What is it? What was it? Not Curio. That's a different thing. Curie. Thank you. Curio. Curio's a friend of mine at Netscape who some of you may know from his website called Rotten, had another website called Curios, and that was just entering my head yesterday about something else entirely. Anyway, so and then I kind of worked on Joule, but I was on product development for that. So certainly in my travels, in my 30 years of engineering, I've heard countless times the developer mantra, why would someone want to do that? And the co-creation model, of course, answers that by, instead of posing the question in a meeting on a whiteboard, nowadays a Zoom meeting with people who similarly don't have any real life experience or interaction with the product. So you involve people who actually be using or are using during the development process. And this is what I picked up from in the Maker Innovator group. I was not only in product development, so I'd sit in the lab and we'd bring up a board, right? So here's the new Galileo version, the Gen 2 Galileo boards. We're in the lab in Leixlip, Ireland, in IR5, and working on those things. Then I'm off to Toulouse with the Edison team, and then I was off to Oregon for the Curie. We did America's Greatest Makers with the what would be the Arduino 101 board and the Curie device. Those are other stories for another time. But what you end up with when you work with the Maker community or people. Community is overused, I think, but if you watch someone using your product and you watch them have difficulties or run into documentation issues or make the same mistakes over and over, you can fix them. I found the experience invaluable. Excuse me. And then I was having a discussion. That was awful. Sorry. My voice is enjoying the allergy season in Vegas, as you can hear now. So while I was at Intel, I was at CES in the Intel booth, and we were showing off it was the year before we had the maker teams there. The Intel dress was very popular by Anouk Whiprecht. And we had a bracelet, which never saw the light of day, I think, if it did ship. We had the headphone, or the earbuds, powered with a heart rate sensor, designed by one of my colleagues, Indira Negri. And then we had, we had a host of other technologies in there. So I was chatting with the woman in the Oregon, in the Hillsboro Intel offices, who had written the software for Edison that was in the Intel dress that would basically measure skin temperature, heart rate, whatever other biometrics, and it would make an assessment about stress levels and then actuate some motors and whatnot, so that it was, that not a completely practical 3D printed outfit, but a technology demonstration, a moving art piece. Anouk is extremely talented in general, so that part was cool. But the discussion eventually came around to practical use of mood detection or well-being detection in general. And I said, when I was visiting Arduino, this had to be, I think it was a few months before CES in January. I was there in November, so it may have been 2 months before. I can't remember. I was there when they were still renovating what would become Casa Jasmina, which was the hackable apartment. You could go there and learn about IoT, smart homes. So Casa Jasmina, in the spirit of Arduino, was about sort of the educational side of a hackable apartment, right? So I said, what if there was a hackable home that could be used to develop the products around what we're talking about, like personal well-being, detecting stress or the well-being or whatever you can measure. What if a home was actually focused on maintaining that well-being or keeping an eye out for changes in health, well-being? So we were throwing examples around, and one of the age-exposing items, I said, well, what if there was like like if your home could indicate and respond to your mood, your however you feel physically, mentally, emotionally. And my colleague said, oh, I wanted to develop a flower that would match your mood. So if you're in a good mood, it would be up, and if you're in a bad mood, it would drop down, wilt, if you will. So I said, oh, like an ET, the extraterrestrial. And if you're listening to this now and you're in a certain age group, you're like, yeah, you were thinking ET before I even said it. And if you are in her age group or younger, you probably still don't know what ET is, but look it up. Reese's Pieces, Drew Barrymore, famous. Anyway, so we were talking about this idea that the technology and the thinking that went into the dress that Anouk had designed and that my colleague had written the software for. What if we took that thinking and we merged it with this hackable apartment idea, and we end up with a home that's looking out for you, that wherein you could do a co-creation sort of iterative development of additional products along those lines, and work with people that actually need these products. So my colleague, who I'm not going to name for a couple of reasons, mostly because I'm going to then say that she said she was suffering herself from anxiety frequently. And she thought it would be a good idea if there was a general, more casual use of technologies to help with people who are feeling anxious, feeling stressed, upset. So that well-being component. So if you can take not just the clothes you're wearing, but the place where you're living, the place where you should feel secure and safe and happy and healthy. If your smart home is doing more than telling you what time it is when you ask a smart speaker, or whatever your usage is, instead of having a camera pointed outside of your front door, or maybe more creepily inside in your bathroom or bedroom or wherever, if the smart home was actually sort of taking care of its occupants. Maybe we're hearkening back to Alien and a computer that runs the ship called Mother. That's sort of interesting, a comparison if you want to go there. But yeah, the idea was, which we sort of expounded on a little bit further, was if you could make a 3D printed article of clothing, a dress, Intel dress in that case, if you can make this thing actually protect the wearer, in this case it would extend some spider-like legs with these little motors, and it was basically get back. Like I'm feeling stressed, I need to be protected, or stay back, get away from me, out of my personal space. So it was an interesting idea, and I said, well, what if your home was doing that? What if your home was saying things like, hey, your body weight is changing, or you're not turning the lights on as often, or why is there food in the refrigerator that's spoiling, or whatever. There's a whole list of things, and the home could act somewhat accordingly. As a I'll say friend of mine, I suppose, Nadia Peak. If you're familiar with Fab Lab, I was telling her this idea while I was visiting her lab, Bits and Atoms, over in Cambridge at MIT. And she interrupted me and said, wait, are you going to decide what the house does? And I said, oh, I hope not. So she rightfully said that should be like a psychologist or a psychiatrist, not a software engineer, deciding how a home should respond to someone who's having a small or big crisis, right? So that obviously, well, not obviously actually, but I concur. So these are the kinds of things where if you have people designing a product in a cubicle, they don't always come up with those sorts of nuances. There is probably somebody somewhere who has designed a thing that will have some kind of an effect on the well-being of its user based on their emotional, physical, mental state or states. They may have made a decision that will impact someone without any regard for the implications of their coding or design decisions, right? Probably the most obvious and critical, perhaps, life and world changing, is the impact of, well, you could just call it the dopamine injectors that are our cell phones and social media and like buttons and whatnot. So if you bring it home a little bit, instead of the social media engaging out, your smart home engaging in, looking after its occupants, you wouldn't want, the example would be if somebody was feeling down, I'll use that's generically you can take that as depressed or sad or whatever. So I'm not dismissing that. I'm just generalizing. So should the home commiserate? Should the maybe the walls are adjustable colored paints, special pigments that react and are programmable? Should the home turn the lights down, darken the walls, keep the windows shuttered, probably with variable tint on the windows? So keep it dark, play some dreary music, and order in some ice cream and pizza. I don't know. Or should it open the blinds? Should it untint the windows? Should it make the walls a bright white? Should it turn on the lights? Blast some, I'm totally drawing a blank. Don't worry, be happy. Why am I not thinking of his name? I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, don't worry, be happy. There again, that's sort of like E.T. You either know what I'm talking about or you don't. So, yeah, that decision is not one that a software engineer should make, and in fact, it's not a single decision. So designing things that can be responsive and maybe even trained to work with users, owners, learn from them. There was a joke Massimo Bonzi of Arduino said. We were at Maker Faire Rome, and he was talking about IoT, smart homes, and he said, I don't want that everybody in this space wants to know when I flush the toilet. And he was obviously being humorous, but that is not too far off from the truth, right? Your Amazons and your Facebooks and Googles and Apple, no matter what they say about privacy, they're watching everything. And privacy, dignity, security, health, well-being, these are all things that can be topics of discussion and development and co-creation. So these are all falling under the umbrella that I'm trying to open, if you can visualize that, that we call CasaNunzia. So CasaNunzia is inspired by Casa Jasmina. So where Casa Jasmina was more on the educational side and had a physical location, it was an actual Airbnb living space that you could live in. So that was the intention. I don't really know. I had a call with one of the co-founders of Casa Jasmina, and it had spun off from Arduino, so it was a separate thing. I believe casajasmina.org is still around, but Davide Gomba, he was the first Arduino person I met in Turin, physically in person, in Turin, Torino. He answered the door when I knocked on the toolbox co-working space side door, the hidden Arduino entrance. And so, I had a Skype call with Davide, and I described the CasaNunzia concept. And the first of all, that he was supportive. But second, the big thing would be it's not intended to be an educational physical platform, but a foundation aimed at this co-creation model on actual product development. So if you're looking at the maker manual taxonomy of makers, it's definitely the pro maker and entrepreneurial maker side of the spectrum, companies, individuals, and then making sure that we don't get products, devices, services that completely miss the mark. I was listening to, I think it was a Curiosity podcast, and they had a clip of a reporter or someone speaking about technologies. There's a wheelchair, electric wheelchair was developed. It sounds kind of like the Segway company's wheelchair. I don't remember the name of it, but it can climb stairs and whatnot. So this wheelchair sounded like a great idea. Oh, it's cool. And if you're not using or depending on a wheelchair, then of course it can climb stairs and do all kinds of other nice things that seem useful. According to the comments that this person, while she was reporting on it, she said, turns out that only 5% of potential users of this technology could actually use it because it's too heavy, it's too large, it doesn't actually function in a way that would help some of the intended audience. So this is a product that was designed and developed almost certainly, I'm guessing, but almost certainly by people who do not use the product or would not use the product that they know of or are planning. So the disconnect, the lack of a co-creation element kind of leaves out a lot of potential. It leaves a lot of things on the table that could have been, you can take advantage of that development effort. Sorry, I'm moving something on my desk. Take advantage of that development effort if you involve the intended user. And this is something, like I said, that I learned in the MIG, going out and interacting with your users, watching what works, what doesn't. If you can actually feed that back during the development process, that is co-creation, right? You can actually make a better product. So it really is win-win, and that will be sort of the mission statement, is to enable that. The benefit to the company is obviously they make better products, and to the users, well, like I said, if you actually need some assistive technologies, or if you will need them, there's an entire design philosophy now called, it used to be called aging in place. Now it's living in place, but aging in place, that's probably more easily visualized, I suppose, even though most people don't think about it. But if you're going to live in your home beyond the 5-year investment threshold, but if you plan to move into a home, your parents and their parents probably lived in a home from, my phone is ringing. Oh, crazy. That's frustrating. Don't even get me started on Android. Okay. So if you intend to stay in your home for the duration, you will find that a step that you could negotiate quite easily when you moved into the home, 10, 20, 30, 40 years later is maybe a little bit high for the hip, maybe a little bit of extra stress on the knee, maybe having a grab bar where a towel rack was, or having some seating and some space that you can move around just in case you need to have a wheelchair, a walker, a cane, and so on. The list goes on and on. So as more and more people are finding the utility of assistive technologies in their life, it seems to make sense to involve them in the ongoing development and innovation in these areas. And that, I think, everybody wins at the end. And that's sort of the driving force. So that will be that. So we talked about that when I was in Phoenix. So not having my laptop to distract me, pretending to catch up on my sprints. We had some good discussions there. So that will be something that I'm sure I will talk about even more. I've certainly talked about it quite a bit here today. But that is, it's been interesting to me for quite some time. And my experience with co-creation thus far has led me to believe that this is, the time has already gone by, but got to start somewhere. And not to say that there aren't existing entities that are trying to make better products and services, and they're focused on, just ADA entirely. I had a nice discussion with the person at the Veterans Administration who is in charge of sort of special needs housing. That was the beginning of a nice discussion, which I hope will continue. And certainly the VA has an entire pool of people and the infrastructure to work in a co-creative development environment while hopefully, now the VA has a questionable track record about computer security, but the notion would be to maintain. Jesus. Computer, stop. Computer, stop. Okay, sorry. I'm not even going to edit that out because if you can imagine a smart speaker product that could work with someone with a speech impediment or difficulty speaking, maybe it would become better for someone with an accent across different languages, perhaps, speaking styles. And it certainly should be able to tell if I'm speaking to it. You can imagine a case where someone has an urgent need and the computer device gets it completely wrong. What are they supposed to do, right? So anyway, that will come up again. And we're already going a little bit long here. Well, technically I try to keep these at around an hour. We're at 41 minutes by my clock here. So I will end with a story, and then we can get back to the sprinting. So a friend of mine from my maker traveling days started making some mead, which is fermented honey. So you're making mead, which is sort of like beer, but it's made from honey. Mead is good. I enjoy some mead. There was a really cool meadery in Sunnyvale, California, where I used to live, called the Rabbit's Foot Meadery. They made some really, really good stuff. From what I understand, they have shut down indefinitely due to the pandemic. So another tragic loss of many. Not to diminish the value of the actual human losses, but it's sad to see just how much destruction has been wrought by all this. But anyway, my friend started his mead. He posted a picture somewhere on social media, a picture of a bottle that it was beginning its fermentation, I suppose, or however he was doing it. So it reminded me of a story, which I'm going to tell you now. So when I was in college, Harvey Mudd College, a small company called Hewlett-Packard, before they split into computing and measurement devices, Agilent, and then whatever else came of that. So HP donated just a big pile of measurement equipment to the college. And as it happens, that summer, the summer of 1992, myself and my friend Dave were working in the stockroom, engineering stockroom, for the summer. It was a good experience. Maybe not as fruitful in life as an internship at some company would have been or whatever, but educational nonetheless. And it did yield this story, which I've already told to my friend there via email, and I said I'm gonna say this in a podcast. So we were sitting in our dorm one day probably a few days after having kind of organized what was called the measurement lab, which was literally an empty room, no special treatments, no anti-static anything, just a room with some countertops on the walls, mounted on the walls. So not tables. I think there was a center, like an island, and these were, quote, permanent, semi-permanent, I suppose. Countertops, laminate, nothing special. And there was just a whole pile of a big chunk of that pile of measurement equipment. And these were mainframes. They called them measurement mainframes. You could slide in different sensor pods into this. It was probably about a 4U chassis. So you place could be a pod that you could wire in external sensors, just screw in terminals and all that. So measurement mainframes, and then AUX work terminals, not full workstations, but actual like little. I can't remember what processor they were based on, but graphic terminals. So kind of an X term. So you could hook these things together. The X term had like a GPIB bus connector on it. You could drive measurement equipment through GPIB, and they also ran VTest, which is like LabVIEW for HPUX. So VTest, Virtual Engineering Environment, if I recall correctly. So very neat, very cool, sitting in a room with no windows. And so we were back in the dorm. Wow, we have all this equipment. They spent millions of dollars. The donation was millions, whatever their actual cost was. And they're sitting in a room, sure, the measurement lab, but that's not really how you're going to. It just seemed very odd. So as it happens, another colleague, a chemistry major named Kevin, was walking by, heading down to the academic end of the campus. I think it was probably a Friday. So, hey, where are you going, Kevin? It's Friday. Going the wrong way. He said, "Oh, I'm working on this lab for the chemical engineering professor, Professor Donald Reamer." Yes, Reamer. So I have to go down every 2 hours for 2 days and collect data from this fermentation lab that we're creating. So it was a laboratory experiment for the class during the year. And we kind of said, oh, geez, okay, well, go down there, I guess. It just seemed ludicrous. But so he basically, if you think about it, every 2 hours for 48-ish hours, wake up, walk down to the academic end of campus, which was, I don't know, I'll call it a quarter, half mile, somewhere in there. Walk down there, take 4 or 5 measurements, like a CO2, a O2, a temperature, maybe some volumetric measurement, and then go back, go to sleep, wake up 2 hours later, do the same. So that just seemed insane. So since this is my story, I'll say that I leaned over to Dave and said, "Hey, Dave, we have like a lab space full of measurement equipment that is still wrapped in plastic and won't ever see the light of day unless we." And he was, yeah. So probably Monday, we got a rolling cart. We put a mainframe, a couple of pods for measurements, and one of these HPUX graphical terminals, wheeled it up to his lab, said, "Hey, Kevin, let's hook this up." So we wired up his sensors as was, so we didn't have to change anything. We just took his existing setup and we wired them into the A to D pod that would take the measurements, and we, using VTest, and Kevin as a chemist he's not a programmer, or wasn't at the time. I think he was a freshman up until the summer. But graphically assembled the experiment, hook up a temperature sensor and a CO2 sensor, put the data on a strip chart on the screen, log it to files. And where before he was taking data every 2 hours, now he's taking data every second, logging it, graphing it, charting it, I should say. So there was much rejoicing. He was happy he could sleep. The professor was happy because now he's getting real data. They could actually look at it and see it working. And I mean, that's, if you can take data every second, but you're taking data every 2 hours, well, one is going to win. One is better. And we're making use of this big donation almost probably within a week of maybe it had arrived 2 weeks before, and we put it in the measurement lab a week before. So look at this. We're already up and running. We're using it. We are engineers. So as it happens, we were also home brewing, giving it a go. So Dave and I we had made our wort. We were fermenting in a carboy. We had our airlock the bubbling was coming to an end. We had collected various bottles. I had a capper. And while we were in the lab setting this stuff up with Kevin, I said, "Oh, is that an autoclave?" Well, yes, it is. It was an autoclave probably about 3 feet tall, like floor standing, the floor model. And you could put things in on the top. You seal it up, autoclave away. So I said, "Hey, we have some empty bottles. Would you mind if we autoclave them?" And he's like, "Oh, no. Geez, you guys saved my life. I can actually sleep." So sure. So a couple days later, we went down to the lab with probably, I'm picturing probably about 2 to 3 dozen bottles, the larger kind, sort of the 16 ounce, maybe, Newcastle bottles, although I think we shied away from the clear glass, but 16 ounce, 22 ounce, some nice bottles that were certainly in need of a nice sterilizing run. That's a good way to start a bottling of your fermenting beer or mead or whatever. So we bring the bottles down, we start autoclaving them. We start taking them out. And I will say here that we did not handle recently sterilized autoclaved glassware appropriately for food. We should have been doing that immediately before bottling, and then bottled them immediately and capped them and all that. So live and learn on that one. But we did have now a work table full of recently cleaned bottles. So when should the department head, Dr. Anthony Bright, when would be the best time for him to bring some HP people through the lab to show off how we're using the new donated equipment? I'll take your second answer. So there was a little bit of a shock. There was some uncomfortable kind of looking at each other, like, what are they doing in here? Which I guess retrospectively is sort of comical. But luckily, Dr. Bright, not only was he British, so he probably had a pint or two in his travels. I don't know what, that doesn't have to correlate directly, but he was certainly not unfamiliar with a pint. So he kind of laughed it off, and Kevin jumped right in with, well, fermentation. Fermentation is fermentation. Takes various forms. So he was pretty good covering, and not that there was anything to cover, but it was an odd look. So the HP people were generally, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, yeah, and they were more impressed with our use of the HP equipment rather than the autoclave and the empty beer bottles. But on exit, they walked out. The door was closing. Dr. Bright stuck his head back in and said, "You're going to take those bottles away." Yes, we are. He said, "Okay." So it had a reasonable ending, but the take home really was about the use of that equipment. And this sort of aligns with what I'm saying with CasaNunzia and in general, which is people have to know and talk and communicate and collaborate. Kevin had no idea that 3 floors down on the basement level of the engineering complex was this new measurement lab with millions of dollars worth of unused equipment that would, as we demonstrated, make his life better, make the experiment better, put the equipment to use immediately. So that was all winning, but nobody was connecting those dots, so to speak. So getting people to discuss and to ideate, say, hey, I have this, you need that. We probably could work together. And so we did. So that was a nice learning experience that I can apply so many ways and so many things and so many areas. And I would like to think that one of those will be the CasaNunzia project, foundation, whatever we end up actually filing. Because collaboration is good. Good ideas can come of it. Better ideas can be developed of it. Iterate. Learn. And hopefully everybody wins at the end. Anyway, that is my Quaggling Sand episode for April 14th, 2021. I am still sort of sprinting, but it turns out I have too many parallel things, and I am not good at serializing that into work complete, work complete, work complete. I'm doing, I need to fix that. Oh, that will work better over here. So I've done a lot of refactoring and adjustments to my core code that will be shared amongst various things. CasaNunzia is not a coding project, so that's often a question as well. Like, what are you guys going to make? Or are you going to actually build homes, or what? I don't know what. But so I actually need to work on the presentation, the pitch. There's an 80-20 picture or two that I have. If I show them to someone who's in this area, who modifies homes for special needs or has the relevant experience or mindset, they look immediately and they identify the point I'm making. So 20% roughly immediately. No further explanation. I get it. I love it. We need this. This is a good thing. 80% are, there's a photo with a shadow. There's the thing, and then there's a shadow, and 80% will point at the shadow. Oh, there's a shadow over here. That's weird. So they kind of gloss over, and that is the crux of the problem, is that sometimes you don't quite know, or sometimes it's staring you in the face, but there's a solution that just needs to be enacted. And that's what we want to do in that one. And I have a whole bunch of software to write, and I have a whole bunch of work to do, and I need to show some specific concrete output for my own sanity, at least. The problem with being a solo entrepreneur is the arguments are weird. My boss is a tyrant. But no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, I have a lot of stuff to do, and staying on task and staying aligned with any sort of schedule in these weird times is difficult enough. Well, it's difficult enough in general. The weird times, working by myself, staying home all the time, growing potatoes, is a whole nother challenge. Maybe you're having the same challenge. So eventually I'm going to maybe have a guest on or two. I'd like to open up sort of a live stream chat, discussion, interaction, drop-ins. Don't say Clubhouse, please, to yourself or anyone else. The world should not be iPhone only. So I'm looking at Telegram or Discord, unless Microsoft buys them, or Mumble or Jitsi. So there are ways that I could do a live interaction, interview / chat discussion. And I think these will also come in handy for the other projects where they have social engagement, social meaning talking to other people, not Facebook and Twitter. Those are necessary evils, but not primary engagement. So look for more of that coming soon, in quotes, at the finish line of some sprint yet to be started. On that note, thank you for listening, and I look forward to that interaction and engagement with a guest or two, or chats or whatever. And we'll see what happens. A co-created podcast. That would be fun. Happens all the time. Why not here? Thank you for putting up with my voice as well. It's very frustrating, but that's yet another discussion to be had another time. Thank you. Let's end it here.